Welcome back to King to the North. Doug Lamereese and Bill Landis. Landis, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. I'm still fighting to get my voice all the way back, so I apologize in advance for that, and thank the people for bearing with me. But otherwise, I'm good. How you doing?
Handsome as ever, though. You're still looking great.
Appreciate it.
And you know, this is why people should watch the YouTube show, because the voice is a little crackly, but man, look at that. I'm doing great. We're going to talk about win totals. We're a little frustrated that all the win totals aren't out yet. I really we did this a year ago, and I really think they were out. So
they were out. I looked. We did this show on it was February 15th last year. Yeah.
Oh, it's February 12th right now. 12th. Look at us.
Yeah.
Okay. So we had everybody to choose from. What we have now, we thought we had them all, and then we double checked them. It was like the site that acted like they had the 2025 win totals over unders for everybody. It was like, no, these don't make sense. They're actually from last year. Why are you labeling it that they're from 2025? So what we have are 10 Northern teams, like the big name Northern team over under win totals are out on DraftKings and FanDuel. Same for the South. So we still want to do this. I think it's a fun thing to talk about. I can't do 1,000% made up hoo-ha like in February. It has to have at least a little ball talk grounding. But we also don't have to go through third string tight ends in February. It doesn't have to be homework.
Okay.
So I think win totals, Landis, it allows us to talk about what's really going to matter in the 2025 season. We'll also give it a little zingy zing, like we want a little zingy zing.
Got to mix in some zingy zing. Yeah. And I think we'll more like lock in right on like actual picks that we really believe in for the season as we get closer to the season. I know you and Tishu did that last year in August. And I think you and I did a version of that last year too. So I look forward to doing that, but taking what we have available now, I think it's a fun time to dive in.
So we're going to make our predictions. We each did 5. We're going to review how we did a year ago. And I think it's I like tracking evolution of thought. I thought this in February before spring ball, then spring ball happened. Then I thought this, then maybe something else happened in the transfer portal. And then I thought this, and then we got to preseason practice and I thought this, and then somebody got hurt and the season started. And this is what I thought when the season started, when all the hay was in the barn. So I think that's worthwhile. We'll review what we thought a year ago at this time on this show, but we're going to start with teams that we aren't necessarily making predictions on their over under win totals, but we have our 4 most successful at the moment Northern programs. We have the team that was number 1 and the only undefeated regular season team, number 1 the entire second half of the season in Oregon. We have the national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. We have the national runner-up Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and Penn State, who made the semis. Those 4 programs, as it turns out, their win total for 2025, and this is the regular season, 12 regular season games, they're all at 10.5 wins as their over-unders. So the odds on that, Ohio State is more favored to go over. If you want to bet the over, these are the betting odds. This is not a betting show. It's just to give you context. Ohio State's minus 110. Oregon is basically even money, plus 100. If you bet $5 on them to go over 10.5 wins, you'll win $5. Penn State is plus 120, which means you'll win. If you bet $5, you'll win $5.60 or something. And Notre Dame's plus 125. So those are the 4 teams. It's the same number, Bill. But according to the sports books, the likelihood of it happening, Ohio State first, Oregon second, Penn State third, Notre Dame fourth. Okay. We're establishing that as a baseline.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I'm a little surprised by it. That it's juiced so much, in Ohio State's favor, being the one most likely to do it. Because Ohio State didn't do it last year, and there's some pretty tough games. There's some pretty tough games on the schedule this year. It's you go through it and you just go okay, I think they'll win this. This is a toss up. I feel like this is a loss. You never go through Ohio State's schedule and say this is definitely a loss. But when you start approaching the territory where it's they have 2 or 3 toss-up games like that, it's not always like that. And I think Ohio State does have that this year. So to see them to be the favorite here among these 4 teams to do it is a little odd, because I think there's a lot of people that have been looking at Oregon's schedule and thinking oh boy, Oregon's going back to Indianapolis, or even the same thing with Penn State and the way that they've loaded up their roster this year. I guess you have to protect yourself too against Ohio State fans who like to bet on the Buckeyes. So maybe this is part of it, but I don't know that I would arrange them in this order if I was trying to put the odds on who I think was most likely to do it.
Yeah, so we're going to go through the schedules and sort of the rosters on these four teams because I think it's an interesting discussion to use this 10.5 win total to compare these four teams to each other. And then we do have some other Northern teams we're going to talk about win totals, Iowa, Michigan, Iowa State, some other teams that are coming down the pike. But I do think the point, and John's making this point already in the chat, it's like, well, they have Michigan at the end of the year. And that is, I mean, obviously, they haven't beaten them in 4 tries, and Michigan's, I think, much better than they were in 2024. They have Texas to open the year, and they have Penn State at home. And then they also have to go to Illinois. So, like, you can go through, and it's a reminder that Ohio State did not achieve this goal. They did not go over 10.5 wins, as you said, this year in winning the national championship. And they don't have to go over 10.5 wins in 2025 to win the national championship. None of these four teams do. I think probably just like first blush, and we have to get used to this. I think everybody is getting used to it. All four of these teams make the playoff at 10-2, don't they?
Yes.
Like just as we're thinking about it now. Mm-hmm. So it's an odd thing. And it really is. I think as we analyze teams, picking their regular season win total, which can be based on how many young guys are you playing, how are the transfers working in, where are the buys in your schedule, like things like that, is very different, as this season proved, than picking a national champion. And I think we can be more different in those picks maybe than you do in other sports, because honestly, it's like if you're picking Major League Baseball, it's like, I don't know, I think this team will have the most regular season wins and I think they'll win the World Series. Because why would those picks be different? I think you can make a case, Landis, that in college football, you could very reasonably be like, well, I think this team's going to be ranked higher or have more regular season wins, but actually I'm picking this other team to win the national championship. And that's how we're going to operate going forward, I think.
Yeah, that could be the case. I also wonder too, like the blueprint that Ohio State, I think, laid out this year, which was throughout the regular season being very cognizant of how many games that we're going to have to play overall to win a national title, and in turn just playing a little differently throughout the regular season, playing slower, playing lower scoring games, even in kind of like the bigger games. I think it might introduce some more variability into the regular season. And it's like, you would never say like, and I'm not saying like teams are okay with losing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying like maybe they'll play a little differently, that like, you know, the Ohio State Penn State game is more of a toss up because of that than maybe it has been, although that game's been historically pretty tight. Like, I don't know. I think it makes pick and win totals a little tougher if teams with an eye on winning a national championship might start playing a little differently in the regular season.
Yeah, and again, and there are certain people who you saying that's going to hit their ears as we've devalued the regular season, we killed college football. All anybody cares about in the playoff, my sport is dead.
That's not what I mean. Yeah, that's not what I mean.
And it's not what you mean. It's not what you mean.
Yeah. No,
it's not what you mean.
It's like, it's not being okay with losing. It's just being a little more cognizant of like health and preservation, I think.
Yeah, and acknowledging, and Tice is in here in the chat saying Michigan will win more games than all four of these teams. We're going to get to Michigan. We're not talking about Michigan in the same category as these teams just because of what the sports books have set as their win total. We'll tell you the Michigan win total is 8.5. These are 10.5. But I'm not sure that's wrong. So like this is, and you start doing a schedule analysis that really matters. And the other thing about college football is the schedules are so different, right? In Major League Baseball, and the NFL, and the NBA, it's like, well, you might play your division or your conference slightly more, but it's not like this where you can look and be like, I think this one team's better, but they're playing 3 top 10 teams, and this other team that I think is not as good as playing one team in the top 25. Right. And now you're doing a win total thing. And again, that's not the same thing as saying what's your playoff case, because I think the committee's not going to only live and die with total number of wins and putting teams into the playoff. But for this kind of discussion, this is what we're talking about. So can we do this? Let's do this. Let's start at the back. Let's start with Notre Dame and think about what their case is to go over or under. I would like us by the end, Landis, to each decide on the team we think is most likely of this 4 to go over the 10.5 and which is most likely to go under the 10.5. And we'll make both cases based on roster and schedule. Okay. Notre Dame. I did a top 30 players from this year in number of snaps. I'll just give this to you right now. I always try to teach you, then I can't. I love you. I love my people. I can't help it, Landis. I just want them to be happy. And if they want to leave the show at 10 minutes in and be like, well, Doug gave me everything I needed, I'm going to give it to you right now. I'm not going to tease. Top 30 from this year, number of snaps. How many guys are back? Notre Dame, 17 of the top 30 are back. Penn State, 17 of the top 30 are back. Ohio State, 13 of the top 30 are back. Oregon, 10 of the top 30 are back. Oregon is basically a completely different team. Now, they did great in the portal, but, and it would be like, it's one of those things like you're just rooting for laundry. You actually don't even know the laundry you're rooting for, right? Because it's like, well, they could be in orange and teal next week. But it's like that. This is any Oregon bet, any Oregon belief is based on two things, mostly for Oregon, which is Lanning and this staff. Dan Lanning's a dude. They didn't lose, like, and unlike the other teams that we're talking about, the other three teams, like they didn't lose any of their coordinators. They lost Junior Adams, who was their co-offensive coordinator, and the receivers coach, which is actually a big loss. I meant to talk about it on the Monday show, and we didn't. They lost him to the Dallas Cowboys, plucked him away. But they didn't lose their play callers on offense or defense. So for Oregon, this is a belief in Dan Lanning and the staff, and it's a belief in there's a decent number of the guys that they're bringing in the portal who are like established players elsewhere. They just haven't done it at Oregon. So it's like, it's not, you're not going in blind, but it is, I was borderline stunned at how much Oregon's losing.
They are losing a lot, but they're also, it's also belief in them not playing Ohio State, Michigan, or Illinois, which they played all three last year. Yeah,
that is correct. Now, and we'll get to Oregon in a second, but like I could also spin you on like they were 1 of 134 last year, and like they got pushed a little bit, and they won the 1-point game against Ohio State, and Wisconsin gave them a game, but wasn't really in a position to get over the top. And it's not luck, but also maybe the worm's going to turn a little bit. So I could make that Oregon case, but we're starting with Notre Dame. All right, Notre Dame. Again, this exercise, I looked. Am I going to pick Notre Dame to win the national title? Notre Dame is going to be awesome. Notre Dame. It's the other thing about this.
They're changing their quarterback. They're changing their quarterback.
And comparing these four teams.
Yeah.
New, young, talented quarterback at Oregon after a veteran who did everything they wanted left. New, young, talented quarterback at Ohio State after a veteran who did everything they wanted left. New, young, talented quarterback at Notre Dame after a veteran that did everything they wanted left. But all those.
But of those three, Notre Dame's is the least certain. It's like if you were, it's like rank in order of certainty, Julian Sayin at Ohio State, Dante Moore at Oregon, CJ Carr at Notre Dame, you would put CJ Carr last in terms of being like absolutely certain that he's going to be the starter, right?
In part because of the injury, because he was set back in 2024 by an injury.
There's two other guys there. There's two other guys there that I think could conceivably start.
So Steve Angeli feels like that he could start the year and be like the guy, because also Notre Dame starts off probably with their two toughest games with Miami, bye week, Texas A&M. And if it's like, man, we do not want to throw CJ Carr into his first two career starts in those situations. Remember what happened? Steve Angeli came into the freaking Penn State game and he like revived the offense and led them down the field for a field goal drive to like sort of kickstart that stuff. Like that dude, I think that guy can be a winning college quarterback, right? Which is kind of exactly what you're saying.
I think he can be. I think Notre Dame believes that he can be. And I also like Kenny Minchie's got some juice, man. It's based like off of a spring game, but like, yeah, he can scoot around a little bit.
There's some stuff you can think about. It is the least certain you are, and it's also, I mean, and then Drew Aller at Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, Notre Dame were the shining examples of this is what a one-year quarterback transfer can do for you. Could Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, and Riley Leonard have gone any better than they did? No, at least up until Dylan Gabriel ran into the Ohio State defense in the playoff, and that was just a buzzsaw defense. What are you going to do, right? But otherwise, those are the exact, this is how the transfer portal works at quarterback, especially for one-year guys. Because you could find guys like Bo Nix and Michael Penix and, Jaden Daniels and guys like that, but they're multi-year. Like the one-year established QB, but now they're all going young, unproven, but talented. So, but Notre Dame has that. But Notre Dame with these 17 guys back. And for instance, not counted in their guys with the 30 most snaps who are back. Jordan Botelho, who they lost early in the year. He's back, but he's not one of those 30. Boubacar Traore, who they lost early in the year. He's not counted in that. Charles Jagisaw, who was supposed to be the starting left tackle, and then, by the way, started at left tackle in the national championship game and was ready for it. He's not counted in that. And they lost some of the guys they lost. When I say they have 17 of the 30 back, some of the guys they lost, the 13 they lost, 3 of them are offensive line transfers who played a lot. Pat Coogan, Rocco Spindler, and Sam Pendleton, who all started big chunks of games for them this year. You know why they transferred? Because they weren't guaranteed to start in 2025. So those aren't like, oh no, what's Notre Dame going to do? It's like, actually, sorry guys, you were great.
Right.
But Notre Dame doesn't need you, because now they're going to have Jagisaw at left tackle. Emil Wagner is back at right tackle. Ashton Craig, who got hurt this year, is back at center. Anthony Knapp, who was forced to be the left tackle as a true freshman, is now probably going to play guard. And then they have Billy Schrauth back at the other guard spot. Like, they're set. They are locked in on offensive line while losing 3 guys to the portal. So anyway, Notre Dame stacked.
Notre Dame is stacked. I thought it was kind of funny. Like, some of the reaction to those offensive linemen entering the portal was like, oh boy, Notre Dame's roster's falling apart. I was like, you don't understand the dynamics.
You don't
of Notre Dame's
understand
offensive line. These guys, like, and I'm not trying to take away from those 3 guys all played really important roles in a team that went to a national title game, but they weren't intended to start the year. They saved Notre Dame's butt, but they probably weren't going to start next year either. Like, I get why they left. I don't think it says anything about Notre Dame other than Notre Dame had a ton of offensive line depth this past year. But Notre Dame is returning. I mean, it's one of the off the top of my head, without going through everything, I would very confidently say it's a top probably 3 offensive line in the sport next year.
All 4 of these teams' offensive lines are going to be super interesting because Notre Dame has a ton back. Penn State has even more back than Notre Dame does, because Penn State's returning like 4.5 starters. And then plus they have like a stud ready to move in, right? Cooper Cousins, everybody's excited about. The only guy they're losing as a starter is Sal Wormley off the Penn State offensive line. And they're bringing back both Anthony Donko, the right tackle who got hurt, and Nolan Rucci, the right tackle who came in and played awesome after Donko got hurt. And they're also bringing back Nick Dawkins and Drew Shelton and Venge Ione, who is an all-North, all KOTN selection. So anyway, I'm jumping ahead. Yeah. But Notre Dame stacked on the offensive line, stacked in the running back room. Hello, Jeremiah Love. He's back. They lost Mitchell Evans at tight end, Jaden Greathouse back at receiver, Jordan Faison back at receiver, losing Xavier Watts on defense. But so many, like, they were so young. Like, they're losing Jack Kaiser, but they have Drake Bowen back at linebacker. They have Jaden Osbury back at linebacker. They have Kingston Delilamuasa back at linebacker. They're losing some guys on the defensive line, but they already lost Riley Mills. And they made the national title game without him. They lost him in the playoff. They lost Howard Cross for a chunk of the regular season and survived without him. So and we talked about it a ton. If people watch the show and listen to the show, we talked a ton about how impressed we were with Notre Dame's ability to overcome injuries and make the national title game. And that's only going to pay off more. So Xavier Watts, Jordan Clark, Jack Kaiser, Howard Cross, Riley Mills, RJ Oben, like defensive losses that matter.
Sure. But
they have a lot of guys ready to fill in. Mitchell Evans will hurt a little bit, but like, they're bringing back 17 of their top 30, plus the other 3 who really are among their 30 most talented players. And honestly, where you go through the losses on the Notre Dame roster, I think the only spot that feels like a hole is Xavier Watts, because he was one of the 3 best safeties in the country. Everything else feels like, oh no, they have a guy for that. And quarterback, which we already discussed. So quarterback and safety, like the other 20 starting spots, they're good.
I think and even quarterback, it's like, I think you can feel probably about as good as you possibly could with having 3 options among guys who haven't played all that much, but like 3 pretty compelling options there. So no, they're ready to reload. Maybe the biggest question for all of Notre Dame with me is like defensive coordinator, because I just thought Al Golden was so good, and Chris Ash has just been out of the game for a while. It's like I don't know what to fully expect out of Chris Ash, but he has a lot of really good pieces to work with. But so I don't have many questions about Notre Dame outside of who's going to be the starting quarterback.
I don't want to call them toss-up games, but 4 tough games I would say on their schedule: at Miami to open, Texas A&M off the bye in week 3. So those are their first 2 games. Then Boise State at home, which we talked about on the Ultimate Northern schedule. And I don't know. We'll have a USC conversation later. I have a USC conversation for you. I don't want to be completely dismissive of USC. They get USC at home. Their other 8 games, I'll put them in like the should win category. Purdue at Arkansas, NC State at Boston College, Navy at Pitt, Syracuse at Stanford. So it's not a totally daunting schedule. And they have a bunch of dudes back. I'm going to be talking a lot about Notre Dame.
I would also I think it's fair to throw Boise and USC out there as toss-ups, but I think they're in a different category than Miami and A&M.
I agree.
And it might honestly even be that like Boise, A&M, and USC are their own category, and then at Miami is its own separate deal because they beat A&M last year.
They did
on the road.
But A&M's going to play that quarterback that people think's better than the other guy. Right? Connor Wegman transferred. Who's the guy they put in? Marcel Reed.
They're
going to play him, right? I don't know. I don't know. Carson Beck. Well, I'll look. The first week lines are out on some books. I think you could look at this and say, I'm not sure where Notre Dame's not going to be favored. You know what I mean? Like, are they favored in every game?
Are they? Yeah, I don't know. I guess the only one they wouldn't be is at Miami.
So I'll look that up. So anyway, are we enthused about Notre Dame's prospects in 2025? Is that a fair thing to say?
We are quite enthused about Notre Dame's prospects in 2025.
All right.
Yes. I'm
going to give you the opening week line. They're going to be favored in every game. They're minus 2.5 on DraftKings against Miami in week one. If they're a road favorite against Miami, I think they're favored in all 12 games. Strong candidate to go over 10.5. Okay.
Yes.
Let's go to Penn State. Penn State also has 17 guys back, but they do have, I think, a decent number of like more holes blown in the roster than Notre Dame does. Like if we just said, really, it's like Xavier Watts is the guy that you probably can't exactly replace, and then they have to figure out quarterback, but frankly, Notre Dame has 3 options.
Yeah.
Penn State, you're losing Abdul Carter, and you're on as an edge guy who's going to be a top 3 pick in the NFL draft, and you're losing Ty Warren at tight end, who was the best tight end in the country. He's more than a tight end. He's going to be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. Now they have guys. Khalil Dinkins is a pretty good backup tight end, and who's the guy that everybody loves? It's like he played a little bit this year as a freshman and burned the red shirt, but like people are enthused about that guy too. So I had his name right in front of me, and I lost it. And then like some of the other people they're losing.
Luke Reynolds.
What is it?
Luke Reynolds.
Luke Reynolds. The Penn State tight end is Luke Reynolds. They lost a couple guys in the transfer portal, so it's like they have 17 of 30 back, but that 2 of their receivers transferred because they brought in other transfers that they think are going to be better. So it's like those are among the losses you count. Cam Miller in the defensive backfield transferred. That's one of the losses. They didn't get every single guy to come back. Jalen Reed is going to the NFL. Kobe King's going to the NFL. Devon J. Thomas is going to the NFL. Amin Vanover, who played really well when Carter was hurt, tried to get a 6th year of eligibility and his waiver was denied. So he's leaving. But they have Keziah Izzard, who I thought was a good defensive tackle, is gone. But they have like Zane Durant back on defense on the defensive line. They have denied Dennis Sutton back at edge. They have Zakee Wheatley back at safety. They have AJ Harris back at corner. They have Zion Tracy back at corner. And then on offense, they have literally like 7 of their top 8 offensive linemen back, and the two of the better running backs in the country, probably the best combo in the country. They have a ton back on offense, including Drew Aller. Again, I like no surprise to anybody, Landis, but on double check, pretty stacked.
Pretty stacked, yeah. And they have a question at defensive coordinator too, but at least they filled their hole with maybe the best defensive coordinator in college football. So
yeah.
They're loaded up to make a run at the national championship. I think everyone's aware of that.
Nevada, Florida International, Villanova are their 3 non-conference. So that's win. Not even tested. And then, yeah, disappointing. This is one of those, like, we have to call it out. We were all excited for Penn State, West Virginia last year. James Franklin schedules patsies in the non-conference, right?
He, more often than not, he does. Yeah.
Ohio State's playing Texas.
Yeah.
Penn State's playing Villanova. Right. So, I mean, I really, this is a disservice, and I get it, especially when they don't have like guaranteed rivalries and stuff. Like, and now they're playing Oregon and Ohio State. That is a lot, but
they don't have. Can I run you? So 2020. So this year it's Nevada, FIU, Villanova. 26, it's Marshall, Temple, Buffalo. 27, it's Syracuse, Delaware, Temple. 28, it's Ball State, Syracuse, UMass.
I'm down with Syracuse. I'll give them Syracuse. We want that.
Syracuse is fine.
And I'll give them West Virginia. But like they don't, and they're not doing, but they do none of like the cross country, like Michigan's playing Oklahoma.
Right.
Penn State's playing Villanova. So like, come on, James. Like this is embarrassing. Now, but it's like, well, but they're getting Oregon and Ohio State, but still, I mean, you can play, I think you should play one real non-conference game every year. So the non-conference is a joke. And then at UCLA, Northwestern, at Michigan State, at Rutgers, I think are all games that you should assume Penn State's going to win, right? So then the 5 toss-up games, Oregon, at Iowa, not toss-up, tough. Oregon, at Iowa, at Ohio State, Indiana, Nebraska. Penn State's 2 byes this year are before the Oregon game and before the Ohio State game. How about that?
Yeah. They usually luck out pretty well getting a bye before the Ohio State game. But
Ohio State also has a bye. Ohio State and Penn State are both coming off a bye into that game. So when we think about Drew Aller, the offensive line, the 2 running backs, and then the transfer receivers that they've added, and year 2 of Andy Kotelnicki, this offense has a chance to be quite excellent, right?
Yeah, pretty diabolical, I think, running the football. But then you hope to see a step from Drew Aller, and like you really hope if you're Penn State that this time around, bringing in a couple of transfer receivers is the time that you hit. And if they do, then I think the offense takes a step forward. If they don't hit a receiver, then maybe it's more or less what it was last year, but probably even more dangerous running the football than they were last year.
Yeah. Offensive line is going to be really good.
Very good.
And they're going to have to figure out, how to replace Warren, but they haven't. Luke Reynolds is a 5-star. Like this is like,
yeah. And they don't, I mean, they reload a tight end every year. That's like their most consistent position in James Franklin's tenure, at least offensively.
Yeah. They reload at tight end and they reload on defense. So like Abdul Carter, you don't replace him, but Denai Dennis Sutton might look like a 1st-round pick next year. Sure. Right. And they're just, they're going to have dudes. So, and the Knowles hire is big. So I think Penn State, like now the thing of it is, right? They have to beat either Oregon or Ohio State to get over 10.5. So that's like, if you're betting on this, it's like the other 10 you can get to very easily. But now they have to win. They only have 1 game to lose if you're going to go over 10.5. And that is a lot to ask. Ohio State and Oregon are both going to be in the top 10 in the preseason, just like Penn State.
They are. And because I wouldn't even, I think it's fair to mention Indiana and Nebraska as like tougher games. I don't know that they actually will be, especially the Indiana game. And they're both at Penn State. And like the history between Penn State and Iowa is actually pretty interesting. But James Franklin has been good against Iowa, and Iowa typically is a little more pesky at Beaver Stadium. Penn State actually has a better record at Kinnick Stadium than it does at Beaver Stadium against Iowa. And I don't know really what to make of Iowa this year either. We're going to talk about them a little bit, but it really comes down to those 2, I think, Oregon and Ohio State. But the thing that I believe is in Penn State's favor, and like maybe gets us into an Oregon conversation too, is that game's pretty early. That game's in September. That's new quarterback and 2 new offensive tackles going on the road to play in Beaver Stadium against a pretty veteran team with a lot of continuity. Fair for anyone to say like James Franklin hasn't really won that type of game just yet in the regular season, or wins them rather infrequently. But I think Penn State's the better team, and they're at home, and it's early in the year. So like there's a lot of things stacking up in their favor there.
So we can slide to Oregon then, because this is Oregon's start to the season, right? Montana State week 1, Oklahoma State week 2. But then week 3, they have to go to Northwestern. So that's a flight, right? Long trip. Then they go home and they play their rivalry game against Oregon State. And then week 5, they fly to Penn State when Penn State's off a bye and 3 easy non-conference games. Penn State's going to be practicing for Oregon from today through the start of that game because they have nothing else in their way.
Yeah.
They're going to put their 4th stringers out against Villanova, and they're only going to think about Oregon, while Oregon's flying across the country, flying back to play a rivalry game, and then flying to Penn State. That is a horrible spot for Oregon. Horrible.
It really is.
Horrible.
Yeah. You're going to see the Penn State's first 3 games are going to be the least informative 3 games of good college football teams ever played.
Nobody's going to watch them. Nobody's going to watch them. And they're not, except us and our audience. But we're not going to learn anything. And I think we're probably gonna fall into some like, I don't know, because they'll do something goofy. And they'll be one of those games. Florida
They
International
did almost
will be
lose
like
the Bowling Green last year.
I know it'll be Florida International. I guarantee is going to be 23-20 in the middle of the third quarter, and people are going to be freaking out, and we're going to be like, I don't know. And then Oregon's going to do their second cross country flight in 2 weeks, and Penn State's going to be like, welcome. We're going to eat your ducks. So Oregon. They're losing their entire defense.
Yeah.
They're probably 3 of their top 11 are back on defense. Bryce Betcher at linebacker, and then Tuioti and Uyunglele on the edge. Yeah. And then they're losing Jordan Birch and Derek Harmon and Jeffrey Bassa and Jabbar Muhammad and Kobe Savage and Tyson Johnson, like their whole secondary. But they lost their whole secondary before and plopped in a bunch of transfer guys. So they're losing their whole secondary, and they're adding Dylan Thieneman from Purdue, who was like the best safety in the portal. And they're adding Taron Johnson from Northwestern, who was like an excellent player. So we know they're doing that. And then offensively, they're losing 4 of their 5 offensive linemen. Only your guy, Pancho Lualu, is back at center, but they added 2 real tackles in the portal, including maybe the best tackle, like one of the top 5 tackles in the portal, right? Isaiah World, everybody wanted him. Yep. And then they added like a second team all Big Ten guard from USC, who was like USC's best player last year.
Emmanuel Prignon from Wyoming. Yeah.
And they're losing Terrence Ferguson at tight end, but you love Kenyon Sadiq. He'll step up there. They lost Jordan James at running back. Noah Whittington's back, but they added Mekhi Hughes from Tulane, who was one of the 2 or 3 best running backs in the portal. They kept Evan Stewart. They're losing Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden, but they added Malik Benson from Florida State. So it's like they're adding talented, experienced guys, but their whole team's gone.
Yeah. It's a radical experiment, I think, in consistent national championship viability via the transfer portal. To be honest, it's a little hard for me to wrap my arms around the idea that they're going to do it again.
They have, I think, so again, like this is my thing, right? Top 30. But frankly, a lot of that is once you get to like the 25th and 28th players and snaps and stuff, those guys typically are younger backups who play a decent amount, and often they're back. So like I say, Oregon has 10 of their top 30 back, but honestly, they have like 6 of their top 22. Yeah. Like I said, they have 3 of their best defensive players back, and the only guys they have back on offense who are really their main guys are Evan Stewart at receiver and Pancho at center. They lost everybody else. They lost their tight end, their running back, their first and third best receivers, and 4 of their 5 offensive linemen. So it's a completely new team. I didn't realize it was this crazy. And also everyone's like, Decorian Moore from Texas. He'll be a freshman receiver who can help them. And like, they do have some good recruits. They're recruiting well.
Naeem offered a cornerback. Yeah.
Naeem offered and maybe, right. But is this the plan, or is this still like is this the last year of early Lanning, where he didn't build through recruiting as much because he was new, and so now they've had to do this? This is wild, man. As much as we're like Kurt Cignetti and Deion Sanders building through the portal, this is wild.
This is wild. I would love to ask Dan Lanning that question, and maybe we'll have to wait till Big Ten Media Days to do that. But is this a plan? Do you feel like this is viable? Probably calls to do some kind of study on like the actual championship contenders and how much their rosters have been turning over and where Oregon fits in that conversation. There's a lot there. They've done it right. Like this is not like it's the first time they've had to build through the portal. And I think, given some of their geographical limitations, they're probably always going to have to do it a little more than the Ohio States and the Notre Dames and the Penn States of the world and the Georgias and the Alabamas and Texases. But it does feel like a lot. And I've said this before. It's especially concerning for me because I just think the 2 most difficult spots to year after year try to do this via the portal are in the secondary and on the offensive line, and they did it last year in the secondary very well, but they're going to have to do it again, and now they're like reworking the offensive line on top of that. It's just it's mildly concerning, but I think the schedule is not overwhelmingly daunting given all that roster turnover.
Montana State, Oklahoma State, at Northwestern, Oregon State, at Rutgers, Wisconsin. 6 games I have in like the should win column. Although again, like their trips, they have to go to Northwestern, Rutgers, Iowa, and Penn State, and then also Washington. But I mean, like that's like 4 long trips, man. Right? So I have 6 games in the.
I'm not calling out like upset alert necessarily, but Montana State's pretty good. And
man,
and Idaho, or was it Idaho State, like put a real scare in the Oregon last year? So just throwing that out there.
Okay. At Penn State, Indiana off a bye, at Iowa off a bye, Minnesota, USC, at Washington. I put like in the, okay, maybe like those are challenges games. But again, other than the only one of those games they shouldn't be favored in is Penn State. I'd make Penn State a 7-point favorite in that game at this point with all the things we're talking about.
I would too.
So like that's like I'm counting that as a loss. So now your question is, can Oregon win their other 11 games? And then my point would be, they did it this year, and it's hard to do it twice in a row. And 10-2 is not a bad year. But I think somewhere in there, with this complete roster turnover, somebody gets them, would be my guess. But you could look at it and say, I'm not sure exactly who it's going to be. It's not like they're not like, again, Ohio State's playing Texas and Penn State. If Oregon was playing Texas and Penn State and Ohio State or something, be like, well, no way would they have a 10.5. A lot of their 10.5, right, I think, in this situation is schedule based.
Yeah, I would say I'm with you on penciling in Penn State as a loss right now, and I would characterize Minnesota, USC, Iowa, and Washington as like tricky. And
yes,
and when you have 4 of those and only one more loss would get you on the wrong side of this win total, like that is that's a stay away for me, I think.
Yeah. So I think like to look at first blush and be like, this is right of these 4, this is the second most likely according to the books. I don't think that's where we are. So let's go to Ohio State. 13 back for Ohio State. Really, only 3 of their top defenders back. Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, and Davis Igbinosun, who were 1st, 2nd, and 4th in defensive snaps. And then offensively, really what they have back on offense is Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate at receiver. And then like their 3 interior offensive linemen who were like kind of a shuffle, but like maybe, I mean, none of them are all American quality, right? So they're losing, and not all 3 of those guys will start. Maybe only one of those 3 guys will start this year. So they've basically lost everything on offense except their receivers, and they lost Emeka Egbuka in that group. And then on defense, they have like 3 real players, but they lost 8 guys. Like it's a lot. This is a lot. So it's 13 of 30 back, but it is 17 of their top 22, I would say, are gone.
Yeah, I think some of the defensive spots, Ohio State did do a decent job of playing guys who were going to start this year a fair amount of snaps in 2024, which has not always been the case for Ohio State, but it's still a lot to endure.
And then I think you can look at Ohio State. I have 7 sure wins for Ohio State: Grambling State, Ohio, at Washington, at Wisconsin, at Purdue, UCLA, and Rutgers. And if you want to like stop me on at Washington, I'll listen. But but these are 5 real games, or at least 4. Texas, at Illinois, Penn State off a bye, at Michigan, and then I threw Minnesota in there too. But Minnesota is probably another level. I think Texas, Illinois, Penn State, and Michigan could all be playoff teams.
I think they could too, but it's a little difficult for me to not have Illinois in a 2024 Indiana category when it comes to competitiveness with Ohio State.
That is true, but also be on your A game when you go to Champaign. Just like that there might be a better depth of talent, a couple more dudes. We'll have to see. Maybe a couple more dudes.
There's more continuity.
Illinois.
There's more continuity.
Yeah.
Like Indiana was G5 JMU All-Stars, and Illinois is bringing back a bunch of guys who played last year together.
Yeah, Aaron Henry, I think, really coming into his own as a defensive coordinator, right? Barry Lunny, like, been around with Brett Bielema. They know what they want to do offensively. Luke Altmaier back, good tackles back. Like I'd put it in the tricky like Texas, Penn State, Michigan are like you can lose those games. And Illinois is tricky, I think. Yeah. So anyway, that it with all these losses, considering they did not win, they did not go over 10.5 this year. I'm a little surprised. And again, this is just probably public money and they're the national champions.
Sure.
Like Ohio State can have a very good year and go 10-2 and make the playoff and make a run at the national title. But 10-2 for Ohio State would not surprise me at all.
No, and it's been rare, at least for me, I think, to go into a season where like 10-2 actually felt reasonable, if not like the right thing to predict. But this feels like one of those years, and like again, like we're in a world where like that's fine because you're going to make the playoffs.
That's fine.
10-2. Yeah,
and when you have Penn State and Texas on your schedule, like you're in the top 5, but also so are Texas and Penn State, and then also so is Michigan, who again, like we'll get to Michigan. Michigan is not going to look like 2024 Michigan right now. The one part of this too, they're not going to have Mason Graham and Will Johnson and Josiah Stewart, like a bunch of those guys who made that defense go. But like, so like this is like the least defensive. I'm not sure you're going to go over your win total that you could have. So let's do this. Who would you say is most likely to go under if you were making an over/under bet? Right, you're going to bet the under 10.5. Who would you bet on of these 4 teams?
Probably Oregon.
I would do Oregon too. And the only thing it's the schedule that scares you away. But I just don't think they're going to go 11-0 in all their potentially winnable games.
Right.
And I think that Penn State spot is almost impossible for them.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's where I am. Yeah.
Okay. And then who do you think is more? Who would you bet to go over 10.5?
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. Okay, I agree. So we're just telling you we're different than the odds. Notre Dame plus 125 to go over 10.5. This isn't a gambling show, but maybe we direct people there now, right? That's all.
I may or may not have put a wager on it.
Okay.
Already.
That's okay.
Yeah.
We're not a gambling show, but we're allowed to gamble.
Yeah, don't take gambling advice from me. Yeah.
I put $2 on the Lakers. I did an adjusted line in Luka's first game, the Lakers minus 19.5. It was 12.5, and I jacked it up to 19.5, which is high as you could go in Luka's first game against the Jazz. And I was like, and then I went to bed, and I was like, this is going to win for sure. And then I looked in the morning, and the Lakers had won by 19 after having a 32-point lead with 6 minutes left. And then they just put in the 4th string, and Utah's 4th string destroyed the Lakers and came back from. That's why you don't gamble.
That's why you don't gamble. Yeah.
I could have won $1.88. Instead, I lost $2. Great. Thanks a lot, gambling. Okay. That was worth doing. I had it budgeted. Let me look. I had it budgeted for 15 minutes and we went 43.
Yeah.
So we'll get a little tighter rest of the show. But when we come back, how did we do with our over-under picks a year ago? And then what are our actual over-under win total picks from what's available right now for 2025? All of that next on Kings of the North. Doug Maurice back with Bill Landis, Kings of the North. If you're watching on YouTube live, thank you. If you're watching back on YouTube later, thank you. If you're listening on a podcast, thank you. This is what we did last year, Landis. My picks from last year at this time in 2024. I went 4-2 on my picks. I was 3-2 on my Northern picks, and I hit my South pick. Syracuse over 6.5 wins at this time last year. Killed it. All about Fran Brown, all about Climb Accord 9-3. Easy cheesy, cash that bet, right? How good? Look at that. How good is that?
I'm mad at myself for not being on that one. Yeah, I'm mad for not being on that one. Yeah.
Minnesota. I believed in Minnesota from the jump. I was offended by their 4.5 win total last year. I said over. They went 7-5. Easy cheesy. And they could have won 9. Like this was 4.5 for what that program has become under PJ Fleck was offensive. And I called it out and I cashed it. I don't think I actually bet it, but I theoretically cashed that bet. Maryland, under 7.5, you also had this. We'll get to your picks in a second. We just thought like they were headed for a downturn. And again, we completely nailed it. They were closer to 3 wins than they were to 5. So under 7.5, they went 4-8, nailed it, right?
Yeah, they had the miracle win against USC to get the 4.
Yeah, that was their only Big Ten win.
Yeah.
So we saw that coming. Now, my losses, Nebraska, I said over 7.5. I got caught up in year 2 Matt Rule juice, and it was poison. 6-6. And so like they blew the game against Iowa at the end of the year, but that even wouldn't have gotten them there. Like this was wrong. This was the wrongest I was. And then West Virginia over 6.5. Here's the thing about this. I was telling people like bet alternate lines on West Virginia. I was like, take West Virginia over 10.5. This 6.5 is nuts. They had a terrible season. Their coach got fired, and they still almost went over. Like who'd they play in week 12 or like week 14, the last game of the regular season? Baylor?
Texas Tech.
They played, all they had to do was like win at home, I think, in the last game of the regular season in a very winnable game. And they still would have gone over in a disaster of a year, which is like how close that was. Like this is my favorite kind of betting.
Their last game was at Texas Tech. They lost 52-15, but in week 11, I guess it was, they played Baylor at home and lost 49-35.
Okay. All they had to do was win one of those two, right? I could not have been more wrong about West Virginia. And frankly, it still should have cashed. So that's the kind of bet. Being incredibly wrong and still cashing a bet is my kind of betting. And then you and I, we were talking real talk. We were spitting hot truths about the SEC, even back in February. LSU under 9.5, 8-4, Brian Kelly. Thank you for the win. They stunk. And now we get to have another year, Garrett Nussmeier. Oh, Garrett Nussmeier is going to be the number 1 pick. Great. Awesome. Bore me to death. My God. Okay. So those were so I was 4-2. Now let's go through your bets from a year ago at this time. You went 3-3, but again, like very close to being more successful. You can take us through these.
Yeah, 3-3. So on the under for Michigan, 9.5. Michigan ended up going 7-5. That season didn't go entirely how I thought it was going to go because I didn't think they were going to beat Ohio State. So their season was better than I expected it to be, but still getting the 10 wins, given all their roster turnover, seemed like a rather big ask. Michigan State probably just feeling the Jonathan Smith love a little too much, but it was 5.5 and they won 5. Probably some games in there they could have won. The Boston College game, which I have on here too. I was wrong about BC last year. Sorry, I muted myself to cough and I forgot to unmute myself.
Yeah.
Lost to BC 23-19.
Yeah.
So that kind of cost me there for Michigan State. I was with you on Maryland on the under. Was totally wrong about BC season. I had them under 4.5. They went 7-5. That was maybe the team I was most wrong about going into the year. Probably I just did not have a good read on what Boston College was going to be. Was with you on the West Virginia. I went over 6.5. They went 6-6, as you said. And then I was right about Alabama being under the 9.5.
Yeah.
They went 9-3. Just wasn't feeling a 10-win season for the Crimson Tide. I don't really know why anyone would have been, given they lost the greatest coach to ever do it. So I was happy to be on the right side of history there with the under 9.5.
Okay, so we just want to check ourselves, right? I mean, like we're gonna tell you what we think now, but you have to know if you should believe us or not. So should they believe us, Landis, as we get ready to go through these picks, these win totals for 2025?
Maybe. I don't like 4-2 is like 4-2. I think is pretty good, and I guess I was like a weird BC Michigan State game from being 4-2 as well. So I think we had a pretty good feel for it.
Yeah. I think you and I were each like very wrong on one team. I was very wrong on Nebraska. You were very wrong on BC, but otherwise, like we won or we were pretty close or had the right idea. So anyway, there weren't as many Northern teams to pick. We're going to start with, we agree on some stuff. We're going to start with my picks that are on their own. So my first one that is just me is USC because I'm going against Bambi.
Of course.
USC under 7.5 wins. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but what I think is going to happen is that USC is going to start 4-0. People are going to be like, and then they're going to lose 4 straight. And then they're going to be 4-4, and people are going to be like, is Lincoln Riley going to get fired? And then they still have to play Oregon. So I like 8 wins is a lot. Missouri State, Georgia Southern, at Purdue, Michigan State to start. But then they hit this stretch at Illinois, Michigan, at Notre Dame, at Nebraska. So
yeah,
we think Illinois, Michigan, and Notre Dame are going to be good. And like at Nebraska, as Dylan Raiola is figuring it out, like I just like year 3, I don't even think we have to be like over the moon. Like Matt Rule's going to win 10 games in year 3 to think like that's a tough trip for USC. And then they are Northwestern, Iowa, at Oregon, UCLA. So even like, I'm even giving them the like I think 6-6 is super possible here. But if I were picking their record right now at 7-5, it's mostly schedule based because I don't really want to think about Lincoln Riley and USC, but I think he's gonna get fired.
I think the best they can hope for is 8-4.
Yes.
And then when you're in that scenario, it's like, well, I don't know. Like I think Nebraska's a toss up. I think Iowa could be a toss up. Maybe Clay Helton beats them in week 2.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fun? The UCLA USC rivalry has been pretty close the last few years. It's 4-3 since 2018. Like, I also kind of think this will be Lincoln Riley's last year as USC's coach.
Okay, that'll be. We can. I mean, if we cover them,
I didn't join you. I didn't join you because I think an 8-4 could be out there, but I think you're on something.
And I guess Jaden Maeva could just be awesome and just save Lincoln Riley's bacon. Quarterbacks have saved coaches' bacon before. Sure. Here's my other one. We can spend a little more time on this. I also think Kalen DeBoer might get fired. And I'm going under 9.5 on Alabama. And I am telling you, brother, I can look at Alabama's schedule and tell you how I think they're going to be like have a losing record in November. Because these are their first 9 games at Florida State. And just like, are we sure? Like it was last season couldn't have gone worse. For Florida State. I don't think you should look at Florida State as like a 2-win team. I'm not sure that Thomas Castellanos is going to be the answer for them, but he probably will be better than DJ Uiagalelei was. So at Florida State, then Louisiana Monroe, then Wisconsin at home for Alabama. I don't know. Again, like that was as bad as it could have been last year for Wisconsin. Their quarterback got hurt during the game. Danny O'Neal like might be ready to do something. I don't know. And like, tell me who scares you at Alabama at quarterback this year. Then at Georgia,
are they going to start a true freshman? Are they going to start a true freshman at quarterback?
Maybe, right? Like maybe, or they're going to start Ty Simpson, right? He's the other option. Again, I don't care about Alabama, but I don't think they're going to be good.
Austin Mack too. Austin Mack is there.
Oh yeah, we did like him. I liked him at Washington. I was mad when he transferred. Okay, Vanderbilt, then at Missouri, and maybe Missouri won't be good, but then Tennessee at South Carolina, LSU. So like in the early top 25 ratings, 4 of their first 9 games are against teams that are ranked in the top 20. I don't see any reason to think that they're going to win at Georgia, that they're going to beat Tennessee with Nico Iamaleava, that they're going to win at South Carolina with Lenore Sellers, and that they're going to beat LSU. I see no reason to think that. And then if they lose to either Missouri, Vanderbilt, Wisconsin, or Florida State, they're staring at 4-5.
Yeah. I could say, I don't know, like picking Vanderbilt to beat Alabama two years in a row. I don't think I'd be comfortable there. Missouri loses a lot. I don't know what to make of Oklahoma, and the Iron Bowl's the Iron Bowl. But like I think I didn't join you because like I don't know, like
you're trying to be nice because you did it last year. You were right. Now you're trying to be nice.
Mostly, I just wonder LSU and Tennessee at home. I think they can win those games because I kind of think like maybe all those teams are the same, and at least those games are in Tuscaloosa, so that scared me off of it a little bit. But again, I think you're on the right track.
Check back with me. Check back in August to see if I decide to set the interwebs on fire by predicting Alabama to have a losing record. Check back.
But even if they're 8-4, he'll get fired, right?
8-4 and like no progress, and they've lost their defensive identity, and like the offensive, like, okay, you're a genius. Is that showing us anything at all? Like, and if they have somebody holstered, like that's like who's waiting? If they have a $14 million offer to Dan Lanning,
who's waiting? Yeah, Dan Lanning's riding in on his white horse to save the day.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you want to take over for Nick Saban? Nope. You want to take over for the guy who went 5-7? Yep.
Yes, please.
I'll do that. Yes, please. And then it'll be great. And then we'll welcome Kalen DeBoer back, and Kalen DeBoer will be like the head coach at Minnesota after PJ Fleck goes to USC to take over for Lincoln Riley. Like, it'll be fine.
Josh in the chat says Kalen DeBoer to Iowa.
Oh, Kalen DeBoer to Iowa. Great.
Yeah.
Great. I just don't like him because he works in the South right now. And also, it was a terrible decision by him. It was a terrible decision by all involved, him and the people who hired him. And I don't know why people ignore cultural fit, but it's Rich Rod of the South. And I'm sorry, but he's going, okay, forget waiting until August, 5-7 Alabama. Okay. But I said it in minute 55. I'll say it to start a show.
Okay.
In August, 5-7 Alabama. Buckle up. All right. Let's do picks we agree on. You ready to do this?
Yep.
Michigan. Why do you like over 8.5 for Michigan?
Because I kind of feel like I only see 2 games that worry me tremendously, and it's at Oklahoma early, and it's against Ohio State late in the year. Like New Mexico, Central Michigan, at Nebraska, Wisconsin, at USC, Washington, at Michigan State, Purdue, at Northwestern, at Wrigley, and at Maryland. Like just that all feels like they all feel like wins to me. I guess like Michigan's losing a lot on defense. I think they stand a very good chance of being considerably better on offense this year because they have even if he's not a super sexy OC hire, they have a better offensive coordinator in Chip Lindsey. They're going to have better quarterback play. Like I just think they'll be a more competent offense, even if their defense takes a bit of a step back. But I don't know if the defense is going to take enough of a step back to like lose to Nebraska or lose to Bambi. So I just don't know that I see a lot in those 10 games that worry me. So then it just comes down to Oklahoma and Ohio State, but the win total is 8.5. So they can lose to Oklahoma and Ohio State and still clear up by a game. So like, like are they going to go? I just don't see 8-4 out there for Michigan.
I don't see 8-4
based on the schedule.
I think this is February money to be made on Michigan because a year ago we weren't exactly sure, but like you were on it. Now you said you didn't necessarily expect the Michigan season to go exactly as it did, but you took the Michigan under. And it was one of those things, if you just like wanted to be honest with yourself of like, man, it's hard to lose 2/3 of your coaching staff and have a first-year head coach and a new offensive coordinator, and we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. And like that could be a little hairy, even for the national champs, right? If you were really honest with yourself, you could have gotten to the under. And now I feel like that under is affecting this win total. But it's like, it literally was as bad as it could be for Michigan last year, and they still beat Ohio State and Alabama to end the year. And so you don't think they can win 9 games against this schedule? What is scaring you about like, Oklahoma? Brent Venables might get fired the week after Michigan beats them 35-3. Like this is, Michigan is in much better shape than Oklahoma is right now. Are they not?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And we like John Mateer. We get it. So anyway, I am with you on this. I think that I'm very strong on this because I feel like a 9-3 for Michigan is not a great year. It's fine, but it's over.
But I just like, what's the, I don't know. What's the third loss? I don't know. Maybe Nebraska is much better than I'm anticipating them being this year. Maybe USC is much better, but it would have to be one of those two, right? I don't think it's Washington and Ann Arbor.
But even the idea, like, I'm not even sure who the second loss is at this point, right? So, and you have to, I think you need to leave room. Michigan's not a perfect team. So I think you need to leave room for the loss. Yeah, but for the loss you don't see coming. But it's like, okay, so like the most obvious loss is Ohio State, who they get at home and have beaten 4 straight times. It's like they could absolutely win that game. And then what's the next most likely loss? At Oklahoma because they used to be good? So and there's so much wiggle room on this number. That's the thing. Like and it's like, someone jumped up and bid them and they still went 10-2. So anyway, huge, like I'm huge over. I might bet $4 instead of 2 on this.
Oh wow. I haven't bet on it yet, but I might throw a $5 on it.
Oh, okay. All right. Next one we also agree on is an Iowa over. And this is at least a little historic for me. This is Iowa over 7.5. Do you know how many of the last 9 years, how many times has Iowa gone over 7.5 wins?
Of the last 9, they have done it all 9.
7 times.
Oh,
and the other 2 times they went 7-5. So like, I don't know. This feels a little, it's certainly not as bad as Minnesota's 4.5 last year, but I feel like this is a misread on what the Iowa program is. And you can go through the schedule, right? They have to play Oregon and Penn State, and then they have the Cyhawk, right?
I counted Oregon and Penn State as losses. Yeah.
Okay. But like what, like Indiana, Iowa State, I think there are like 8 very winnable games on this schedule.
They haven't lost to Iowa State back-to-back since 2011 and 12.
Okay.
Minnesota's good, but Iowa's won 9 of the last 10 against Minnesota. Nebraska's a rivalry. Iowa's won 9 of the last 10 against Nebraska. And you get 4 losses to play with here. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I think they're over. Yeah, I think they're 8-4.
Yeah. So I think right, like that. It's can they go 8-2 in their non-Oregon Penn State games, and I think they definitely can. And I just also think that we could be hitting a point in the season where it's like people are like, I can't believe how good Mark Gronowski is. He's the best Iowa quarterback in a decade, and I want to be on that now. I don't want to wait to be on that, right?
No, I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to wait beyond. They're losing a lot on defense. Like that's fair thing. But they're just like, I don't know. When's the last time they were like bad on defense? Like truly bad on defense. Like, I just trust Phil Parker too much.
It was like the Penn State discussion we had. It's like it's a defensive identity. There's going to be somebody there.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, they did like, because coming into 24, it's like they had almost the entire defense back other than Cooper DeJean, right? It's like they had everybody else back, and like now this is the crop. They're losing a bunch of guys, but they're always good on defense, and Phil Parker's still there. So 7.5 seems crazy to me. So we'll convincingly take this as well. I'm almost as strong on this as I am on Michigan. All right, one more that I felt bad, and then you did the same one. So you go and explain yourself. You explain it, Landis. We're going under what at first blush feels like a low number on Iowa State, but we are going under 7.5.
We are, yeah.
The Cyclones, after the first 11-win season, that was including a bowl win, but a 10-win regular season. Now we think they're going to go 7-5.
I'm anticipating a bit of a regression is maybe the wrong word, but just sort of like Matt Campbell has averaged 6.7 regular season wins per year at Iowa State. The last time they had like the high watermark was 9-3 with the bowl win in 2020. Then they won 7-5 the following year, and they won 4 games the year after that, and then won 7 again the year. It's like 7-5, 8-4 is just kind of who Iowa State actually is, and I think they're losing enough to expect that they'll probably be more like that this year. And then there's just some really, the Big 12 is a little hard to peg, I think, going into the season. Like it's the kind of league where you're going to need to see some teams play a couple games, I think, before you really have a great feel for what's going to happen there. But to play Kansas State, and granted it's in Dublin, so like it's a little more of a neutral field vibe there, but Kansas State, Iowa, at Colorado, BYU, Arizona State, and Kansas, like I don't know. Like you want to tell me they lose all 6 of those, I'll believe you. So
yeah,
if there's 6 games on there that I think could be losses, like I'm not going to take an over on a 7.5.
Yeah. And now the other 6 I think are very winnable, but not guaranteed. South Dakota, at Arkansas State, Arizona, at Cincinnati, at TCU, at Oklahoma State. Can I spin it this way? Can I offer you this spin? If you are interested in this, predicting Iowa State to go under 7.5 is a sign of respect for how good 2024 was. Because Matt Campbell in 9 years, to your point, he's gone under 7.5 wins 6 out of 9 years. This is not a program. Like we're saying, like, what are you doing with Iowa? What are you doing with 7.5 on Iowa? They go over that every year. Iowa State doesn't. And so to assume that Iowa State's going to follow up the first 11-win season in program history with another double-digit win year, I think like doesn't give enough credit to how special this year was. So you already outlined it. Like a step back is kind of the norm. Rocco Becht is going to be fun, but Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins were rare, brother. Rare. They're both going to go in the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft. And to have 2 guys who were back-to-back 1,000-yard receivers just pulled out of your offense. I know they have some transfers coming in. It just feels not disaster. Matt Campbell and that staff are too good for disaster. But like a try hard 7-5, 6-6 year where you go to a bowl and set something up for the next run down the line feels very right to me in a Big 12 that, as you said, is hard to get a handle on.
Yeah, and they'll probably surprise us by winning a game, or perhaps even two that we're not anticipating. But I think anything between 6 and 8 wins with a bowl appearance is a heck of a backup, or a heck of a stepping stone, I guess, off of last year into something better in the future.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the three that we agree on. So now we can go to your last two picks that are just you hanging out there by yourself, and you can talk about how much you love Carson Beck. Do you want this hat? Do you want this
No,
hat?
I don't want the hat. I'll breeze through these quickly because we have some news to discuss. Miami over 8.5. I think like at worst Miami's 8-4. I think the Miami loses to Notre Dame, and then I think they probably get to 9-3 because I don't know that I see them losing all three of Florida at home, Louisville at home, and at SMU. The rest of the schedule is Bethune, Cookman, USF, at Florida State, which I think you make a good point of, like, maybe I'm breezing past that one a little too easily. Stanford, Syracuse, which beat Miami last year, but Miami gets Syracuse at home. NC State, they close at Virginia Tech and at Pitt, which I guess could be two tricky ACC road games. Miami has Carson Beck at quarterback, as you mentioned. They have a decent amount back on the offensive line. I think a couple of really important players, although I think they only return, I think it's 8 starters total, but a couple of important defensive players too. I think they're going to be right back in the thick of things for the ACC race. And aside from Notre Dame, there's nothing there that I just think like that's definitely a loss. So for a team that won 10 games last year to get to 9 this year feels fairly reasonable. So I'm over the 8.5 Miami. And then the other one for me was Florida under 6.5. Because I just think they have a really hard schedule again. They have to play.
I pondered the over on this because of DJ Lagway.
I'm worried about getting Lagway for sure, but it's at LSU, at Miami, Texas at home, at A&M, Georgia, then Jacksonville, at Ole Miss, Tennessee at home. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot to get through. But I do think DJ Lagway is talented enough probably to win a game or 3 that maybe Florida is not supposed to win. So I am worried about that, but I only looked at it and saw like 5 games that I thought for sure they were going to win, and one of them includes Florida State, which now you have me second guessing anyway. So it's like LIU, USF, Mississippi State, at Kentucky, then Florida State, and then the rest are just like tricky at best and really difficult at worst. Yeah. So I think 6-6 probably makes the most sense for Florida. 7-5, given that schedule is a little tough to wrap my mind around, but DJ Lagway is very good, so we'll see.
All right, so those are your 2 Southern picks. There is some Northern news, and we will cover it and do what you're watching, what you eating, what you're thinking after this final break on KOTN. Doug Reese, Bill Landis back. We want to talk chicken fingers and yogurt and stuff like that. But first, Ohio State has a defensive coordinator. Pete Thamel from ESPN.com reporting that Matt Patricia, 3-time Super Bowl champion. You got to love when you ever a thing like this. That's how you lead with it. Matt Patricia, formerly of the Patriots. And then, I think Ohio State would probably like everyone to ignore the last 6 years of his coaching career as they make this hire and emphasize the 3 Super Bowls, as the Patriots defensive coordinator is going to be the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. Apparently, the report also includes that Tim Walton, who had been a defensive coordinator previously in the NFL, has been a great corners coach for Ohio State. Is going to be co-DC, but I imagine Patricia's coming in here to call the defense. And then Matt Guerrieri, who was speculated as maybe getting a promotion, might have a title bump, but it feels, I mean, Matt Patricia, this is his defense, Bill. You don't bring in Matt Patricia from the NFL to have him, not call things. So he is the Jim Knowles replacement.
He is the head coach of the defense. That's what Ryan Day wanted when he hired Jim Knowles, and now he has a guy who was an NFL head coach to come be the head coach of the defense for Ohio State.
And to be fair, he was a terrible NFL head coach. He was terrible on the field. A lot of reports of his players not liking him. Then he went back to the Patriots and somehow was calling the offense for part of a year ludicrous. It was like, get Bill Belichick out of here if he's having Matt Patricia call offensive plays. Then he went to the Eagles last year, right? The Eagles fired their defensive coordinator in the middle of the year and had Matt Patricia call it like the last month. That didn't go well. And now he kind of didn't have a job. So like, since he left New England as the defensive coordinator to go be the head coach of the Lions, it's been a complete crap show, right? Like, he can't even argue that. It's been his career has been a disaster since he left the Patriots as defensive coordinator. But once upon a time, he was the defensive coordinator for 3-time Super Bowl champ.
He was. And the last year he was defensive coordinator, their defense was actually pretty bad, and he still parlayed that into a head coaching job with Detroit. I'm a little shocked by it, to be honest. I don't think he's a very good coach, and like, I understand I'm saying that about a guy who's got 3 Super Bowl rings as a defensive coordinator. It is incredibly difficult for me to separate whatever hand Matt Patricia might have had in that from Bill Belichick and it being his defense and him winning multiple Super Bowls with multiple defensive coordinators. So I don't know. It's not at all where I thought Ryan Day was going to go. I'm not surprised that Ryan Day went outside, that he looked toward the NFL, that he wanted somebody with head coaching experience. Like, all those things make a lot of sense. I'm just surprised it's this guy who we found to fit the bill because, as you alluded to, his players in Detroit didn't seem to like him very much. His staff in Detroit didn't seem to like working for him very much. And I suppose people can change. It did seem like Matt Patricia was going on a bit of a tour around the Super Bowl time to, I think, help reshape his image a little bit. And he was doing a podcast with Bill Belichick, I think, to remind people the kind of football mind that he was once thought to be. So maybe he is different than what he was in Detroit when everything he did seemed to be a total disaster. But I think it's a bit of a risky hire for Ryan Day, if I'm being honest, because there's one, I think the question of, can Matt Patricia coordinate a defense when he's not working with Bill Belichick? And is there any potential for this to be like a culture disruptor because he seems like kind of a jerk and people don't like being around him? So we'll see, but he's the guy.
Profile that you want. Like you said, like, and I applied for a job one time where I didn't get it, but the guy they hired was exactly my profile, just not me. Like I said, we want a guy who's just like you, just not you. And I think maybe it's like the Ohio State wants a guy just like Matt Patricia, maybe just not Matt Patricia. But I would not hold the Detroit stuff against him as much, because I think it very much can be a thing when you are not in charge of a culture and you've never done it before, especially when you're trying to emulate somebody. And we've seen a bunch of people leave Ohio State and try to be Urban Meyer and fail. And Matt Patricia left Bill Belichick and tried to be Bill Belichick and fell on his face.
And he wasn't the first guy to do that. Yeah.
It was not. And you hope you learn from that.
Yeah.
So, but he's not going to be in charge. And I also think if Ohio State has kind of established a thing, I think the fact that staffs are bigger now, there's not limitations on staff. He's not going to have to recruit. Recruiting has also completely changed. He's not going to have to build. Matt Patricia is not going to build a single relationship in recruiting. That's not how they're going to go about this. James Laurinaitis and Tim Walton and Larry Johnson and Matt Guerrieri are going to go build relationships. And also the NIL fund is going to go build relationships. Sure. And Matt Patricia, just like Jim Knowles, because Jim Knowles wasn't a good recruiter either. And Ohio State finally figured that out and got him off the recruiting trail, and they locked him in a dark room and said, scheme up a defense. That's what Matt Patricia is going to have to do. And I would assume that Matt Patricia coming in a little bit, not even a little bit, it's like he didn't have a job. Ryan Day said, you come do it our way. You come do it our way. This is not Matt Patricia's style of defense. But also, so I would be more concerned about, because I thought we had a very good discussion about same side coordinator versus opposite side coordinator from the head coach. And the fact that they are hiring a guy to be an opposite side coordinator whose success as a coordinator was as a same side coordinator. Was he really coordinating anything, or was that just Bill Belichick? But if he absorbed 10 years of Bill Belichick and is just kind of copying and pasting and coming into Ohio State and being like, okay, well, we know you want to keep, Guerrieri's going to help us do it. Walton's going to help us do it. We want to keep some of the Jim Knowles principles, and I'm going to paste. I'm writing the book report out of the encyclopedia, right? Is it okay if Matt Patricia writes it word for word and doesn't synthesize the information? It's like, this is what Bill Belichick said to do. That might be okay. I don't know. I don't love it, but I'm not as against it.
It could be okay. Yeah, as long as it's like delivered in a way that doesn't make everybody hate him. Yeah, then sure. I think that's not a bad way to go about your
But what if they
business.
lock him in a room? What if they lock him in a room?
And they might. He's Jim Knowles was the mad scientist, and Matt Patricia is quite literally a rocket scientist. You can read profiles all about how the fact that he studied rocket science when he was in college. That could work, right? I'm pretty transparent about how I feel about it because I don't know that he's a good coach. I know that he worked for like the best coach, but I don't know that he's a good coach. And he has been available to hire for anybody in the NFL to be their defensive coordinator since he got fired by the Detroit Lions, and nobody wanted him.
And he was available to go back and run it back with Bill Belichick at North Carolina, and he didn't hire him either.
Yeah, I've seen that pointed out too. I guess the one thing I would say in Matt Patricia's defense there is that Bill Belichick hired his son to do it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's like setting his son up, I think, to be the heir apparent as head coach. So like that much. I don't read too much into that part of it, but yeah, he went through, I guess it was 3 NFL coaching cycles where someone could have hired him to be their defensive coordinator, and it didn't happen.
Right.
He was a defensive like analyst or whatever they call it in the NFL for the Eagles last year, 2023, and then got promoted to play caller after they fired Sean Desai, and then the defense got even worse. So
right. And then what did he do in 2024?
I don't think he was doing anything. He was doing a podcast with Belichick.
Yeah. So it is one of those things like, can you believe a 3-time Super Bowl defensive coordinator is available? It's like, yeah, because nobody else wanted him. So I like it better than if they had promoted from within, because like I like the idea of the move so much. And they promoted from within on offense, same side coordinator. They went outside on defense, opposite side coordinator. We basically landed on that on our how to hire a coordinator show. That's really kind of how it should work.
Mm-hmm.
So I like this better than if they just promoted from within on defense. But so I'm probably like a 10 out of 10 on the idea. But that's carrying the day on the specifics, because everything you're saying about the specifics of this person, I don't know how you argue against it. And I'm sure Ryan Day's going to face some tough questions about that.
There's also too like the non-football thing. He was indicted for sexual assault in 1996, which didn't come to light until he was hired as the head coach of the Lions, and the Lions kind of blew it off, and he wasn't charged with anything. And like that's like, I'm not saying anything about it other than like that exists in his past.
It does exist,
and
that wasn't known when he was in New England. That didn't come out.
It never came out when
Detroit.
he was in New England, and then when it came out when he was in Detroit, like I think the team owner like said like, I didn't know about that. And then, yeah,
it is worth mentioning. It is. I mean, everybody can make their own decisions about that, but he didn't even like go to court, right? Like didn't the
never went to
it doesn't excuse it. Never went to trial. So it's not even like he was found not guilty or whatever. It exists. It's a part of who he is. It's a part of his background. So it is. How big of a risk do you think this is? And then we'll move on to talk about hot dogs. But like, how big of a risk do you think this is? Could this torpedo Ohio State's season? Could it torpedo their season?
I don't think it could. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think they probably maybe like if you combine like, can Matt Patricia actually do this with a fair amount of defensive turnover? I guess so. What's torpedo mean? Like go 9-3 instead of 10-2 or 11-1? Like I think that I don't think they're like. I don't like. I'm not concerned like that they're not going to make the playoff necessarily. Mostly because of what the schedule is, but I just have a lot of questions about whether or not he can actually do the job.
Yeah. I guess my question would be like, could it be the reason they don't repeat? Could it be the reason?
Yeah.
And there might be a million reasons. I mean, like repeating is hard, and they lost, like, as we said, a bunch of their best players. So,
I mean, we don't have to go back that far to find what it looks like when Ohio State has a defensive coordinator who can't do the job. And they got to the national championship, but then they gave him 50 points.
Right. Like, I think you could.
And Matt Patricia's resume is far more extensive than Kerry Combs's was at the time. I'm not saying they're the same thing, but in my mind, I just have like similar questions about like, can he do this? I don't know.
Producer Mike's asking, is like, will this change the win total at 10.5? I would think from the outside, if it does anything, it would like, oh, they hired a 3-time. I mean, from
Sure.
a brush pass, it's like Matt Patricia. Like that's, I think that it would only help the win total. But
I think there are a lot of Ohio State fans who are really excited about it. Like it's 3 Super Bowl rings. I'm not sneezing at it. I just like it's hard to assess what exactly his role was in achieving that when Bill Belichick was the head coach and Tom Brady was the quarterback.
Yeah. And I do think, I mean, if you're going to get a guy to be a college coordinator who was once an NFL head coach, you're not getting him because he was awesome. Right?
Yeah.
You're not going to get like, whatever. Mike Tomlin's not coming to be the defensive coordinator at Ohio State because it's like, hey, you should get for offensive coordinator. Not Andy Reid. It's like, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
Like, there's got to be, to get somebody with this profile for this job, failure is involved. Like Greg Schiano wound up as the defensive coordinator at Ohio State because he bombed out of the NFL.
Yeah.
So, but Greg Schiano had been a head coach at Rutgers, and clearly that success had been his own success. I think the greatest point here is that we see the Matt Patricia's failures on his own, and you question whether the success he was a part of, how much did he actually have to do with it? That is a very reasonable question.
Yeah, and some might view it as unfair, which I don't necessarily. I don't know that I'd push back on a ton, but that's exactly where I am. And then you just like add on top of that some of the like the interpersonal relationship stuff, and it's like, of course, no one was happy in Detroit because they just were losing constantly. Like I understand that's part of it. And even when he was in Philadelphia, like a brief time, it didn't seem like the players like playing for him all that much either. But that was also a weird year there. So everyone's happy when you win, and people are angry when you lose. I understand that dynamic, but I just wonder like what is going to resonate more with people who are now considering going to play for Ohio State? The fact that Matt Patricia has 3 Super Bowl rings, or the fact that after he left New England, no one really seemed to like playing for him?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the answer to that is. Maybe it's the rings, because winning is what matters most to people.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's not completely dissimilar to Wink Martindale in Michigan a year ago to bring in a pretty like an established NFL guy to coach a defense at the college level that he hadn't done in a very long time. And it's like, hey, how will he?
I just think it was a little
that worked out.
It was
just
a little easier to attribute Wink's defensive successes in the NFL directly to him.
Agreed. No, I think Wink Martindale probably is. I mean, and it was part of a system that they were keeping in place. This is like Matt Patricia has no connection to Jim Knowles, and it'll be very interesting to see if Ryan Day says like Matt Patricia can do whatever he wants to do, or we've established a way of how we want to do things at Ohio State that's going to include some of the, a decent chunk of what we did successfully in 2024, and the Matt Patricia called defense is going to keep a lot of components of that. Like that's a very interesting discussion, is it not?
It is, yeah. Like there's some difference in schematic philosophies there. Yeah. There's also like Ryan Day said he wants to be more multiple with his front. Like, yeah, Matt Patricia can do that. He has done that. So there's some things that are interesting there from a football standpoint too. It's mostly just a bit surprising. Like the name came out a couple days ago and I was like, didn't see that one coming. And then
you almost didn't believe it. Did you not believe it exactly? Did you almost think like maybe he's interviewing him as a favor kind of thing?
Yes.
Like, did you think it wasn't real?
Yeah, initially. Yeah.
I would say I am fine with it. Like, I think it's fine. And the idea that this guy has a long history of calling defenses at a high level is a good thing, right? That I just would prefer that for a program like Ohio State as opposed to just only running it back internally. I will say this, and I think everything else in the sport has changed. If this was 5 years ago, where you only have 10 assistants, where like everybody's got to recruit, where relationships matter in recruiting, I think it's a different conversation. Actually, I'm not sure Brian Day does it.
Probably not. Yeah. And I'm not even like super concerned about like that. I think the last time he was in college was 2003 when he was a GA at Syracuse, and like all the recruiting stuff. It's like I to your point, like Jim Knowles didn't really recruit all that much. I don't think Matt Patricia will have to recruit a bunch, and it's not like differences between college and the NFL game. It's just like how much of that success was actually due to him.
Yeah.
Is what I'm questioning. Yeah.
I don't think it'll have, in terms of like relationships and that kind of thing, I don't really expect it to have like a detrimental effect on like the relationships with the defensive players or anything like that. I will be curious how James Laurinaitis, Tim Walton, Larry Johnson, and Matt Guerrieri look at this. So it's like, I'm saying like, hey, don't just promote from within. But then like this, all the questions that we're asking, there could be certainly people employed in that building asking the same thing of like, I get bringing an outside hire, but you hired this guy instead of promoting me for real. And then also he's a pain in the butt to work with. Like that could be a thing. Or maybe Matt Patricia will come in and have learned from everything in his past and be an awesome play caller and a great dude. Certainly possible. But we're only going by what the reports were coming out of Detroit in a losing situation, which was like a lot of players complaining about him, right? That's what we're talking about here.
And I think too, like, it wasn't that long ago that people would have said like, boy, Greg Schiano's hard to work for and hard to play for. And like, I bet he learned a lot through that too, that like, doesn't seem to be much of an issue for him at Rutgers. Right. So people can absolutely make mistakes and learn from them and be better. Like I'm not closing the door entirely on that idea. It's just a lot of money to pay to find out whether or not he has actually done that.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Interesting. You want to talk about food?
Sure.
TV.
Yes.
That got so serious, right? That's serious. This is serious. This is like a thing.
I didn't think it was going to happen. Like he interviewed on Monday. There was, I think, mixed reaction to it. Some Ohio State fans are really excited about the Super Bowl rings. Like, I get that. I thought most of the reaction was like, wow, I can't believe that's actually a consideration. And then I thought it was going to go like just blow by and they were going to hire somebody else. So I'm a little caught off guard by it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm okay with it. I would say I am a 6.5 out of 10. You're more like, it sounds like you're like a 3, 2.5, 1.6, 0.9. You're
you like 6.5, like on a scale, like 10's like great higher. You're 6.5.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like a 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're below the midpoint. Yeah. I'm like, I get it. Yeah. Okay. Are you watching anything, Bill? You watching anything? What you watching?
Yeah.
What you eating? What you thinking? What are you watching?
I watched a movie I've been meaning to watch for quite some time the other night. The Menu. Have you watched The Menu?
Oh no, I don't want to watch it. Do I know? Tell me if I want to watch it or not. I'm scared of it.
What is? It's not scary. It's
Do they eat people?
No. It's a little violent. It's much more of a dark comedy than it is like a horror or even really suspenseful.
I don't want to give anything away. They don't eat people at all.
No, there's no cannibalism in the movie.
I thought the whole thing was they were eating people. Am I thinking of a different eating people show? Oh, then I'll watch it.
But I think because I thought the same thing, and it's not what you expect it to be.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's good, and like Ray Fiennes is really good in it. There are some very I guess you have to like dark humor, but if you do, like there are some pretty good darkly humorous beats in the movie. There are a couple. I wouldn't even say like it's overly violent aside from one scene in particular. The rest of it, there is violence in the movie, but the rest of it's like sort of more palatable, I guess. But it's pretty funny. It's pretty well acted. It's an interesting like story and something I had never really like seen before. So I enjoyed it. Yeah, I would recommend it if you are okay with a little bit of violence and people getting offed.
As long as they're not getting eaten after they're getting offed, and then I'm good.
There is no cannibalism there's no cannibalism in the movie.
This would be quite if I turn that thing on and like somebody gets eaten in the first 6 minutes and you're like, gotcha, I'm going to be pretty mad about that.
Yeah.
All right. So I started watching Paradise on Hulu. Have you heard about this show? You watch Paradise at all?
I have not.
Sterling K. Brown.
No,
Sterling
K.
Brown.
Brown.
And the guy who wrote This Is Us. So it's like they're back together. So this guy wrote this. And so Sterling K. Brown is a Secret Service agent and he's protecting the president. And this is not giving much away because it happens very, very, very early in the pilot. The president gets killed. And then it's like Sterling K. Brown finds him. And it's like, what happens after that? But then there's also a thing. So I'm just going to tell you there's a thing. So I think it is only coming out weekly. It's not a binge show. But it's maybe 4 or 5 episodes in now, but now my wife and I are officially in like, oh, it's Tuesday. The new episode's out. We got to watch it immediately. So, and if you like Sterling K. Brown, he's Sterling K. Browning all over the place. He's just the best. And also James Marsden, who is like the most charismatic person ever. And like is exactly my age and makes me feel bad about myself because he is so handsome.
Yeah. I had to realize that he's your age.
For
they have
real.
a lot of money. They're able to do things to make them.
We should get side by side of James Marsden. This and this are the same, but they're not. So anyway, I would just direct you toward it. And if you're not aware of the thing, try to stay away from it. And then, but also it's just a good show. And then the other thing is, I wanted to do KOTM, but the only I like talk. We talk about pop culture here sometimes. The thing I've wanted to do in my life is host a How I Met Your Mother podcast. Did I ever talk about this here?
You've told me this before, but I don't know if you've mentioned it on the show or not. Yeah.
I actually reached out to one of the co-creators one time, who's from Ohio. And they have this benefit concert. I was going to be I'm going to go to this benefit. They have a yearly benefit concert, but it's in January around the playoff. And it's in New York City. It's I would go. It's I love that show. I watch it constantly, but it's hey, I'm a podcaster. I would let's do a rewatch show. They started it. And it's the guy who's the main character and the co-creator are doing the podcast. They have they have no podcast guy. So I'm excited to listen to it, but it's also hurting my heart. Because, and this is the thing again, this is my Kelsey thing where my wife is the Kelseys. I still think having outsiders talk about your thing, insiders see it differently. And insiders do the thing, and I understand that you're doing it, but we're all consuming it. And so to have a viewpoint represented by the consumer, because the whole audience is consumers, they're not doers, I think is valuable. It's relatable rather than just be I'm the star, I'm the co-creator, let's talk about what we did. Certainly that's interesting, but I'm trying to weasel my way in as the third guy on the show, but they already started it. I'm going to listen to it, but I'm mad.
Sorry, maybe there's still an opening for you to get in there. I went to a diner here in Columbus last week for breakfast, and we sat down in a booth that had an autographed picture of the guy that plays Ted Mosby, just on the wall.
Because he's from Columbus. Yeah. Josh Radnor. Yeah.
He's from Bexley, I think, right?
How about that? No, now he's hosting a show. Anyway, so go listen to that podcast. I'm sure it'll be wonderful. I haven't listened to it yet. I don't even know if it's out, but they're promoting it. All right. What are you eating?
We got wings for the Super Bowl, like everybody does. We got smoked wings, and I think I'm learning about myself that I don't know that I like smoked meats.
Ooh,
the smokiness I feel overpowers the flavor of everything else, and in a way that I wasn't a huge fan of. And maybe this was just one bad experience. I've had two very bad experiences, eating smoked barbecue, where I just felt I had my head inside the smoker, just inhaling everything as I was eating it, which I didn't care for. And then this case, it was just the sauce on the wings I couldn't taste because all I tasted was the smoke. And I don't know if that's just they did a bad job smoking them and that's not what it's supposed to be like, or if that's what it is like when you smoke meats. But was not a fan. Yeah, not a huge fan of that flavor profile.
Yeah, sometimes I think smoked meat can taste like eating a cigarette.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't want to eat smoke. I want to eat flavor.
I want to taste the wing sauce. I want to taste the whatever the rub is on a smoked brisket or something like that. Smoke is not the flavor I'm looking for. If smoking something does something to the texture of the food to make it more enjoyable, I'm all on board with that. But if it's just imparting a flavor, I don't know that that's something I'm into.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to talk about wings too, because of course I got them for the Super Bowl too. But really, I'm realizing it's just because I just love buffalo sauce so much. I just want buffalo sauce on anything.
Yeah.
Right. You get the buffalo cauliflower and that kind of thing. I just I can't. And I would just look at the buffalo sauce in the beginning with just hot sauce mixed with butter to creamy it up a little bit. And it's just because I don't pour hot sauce on stuff. But buffalo sauce, and because when I get wings, I don't ever get lemon pepper or garlic parmesan or anything. I want the buffalo sauce flavor every single time. And it's just such an important invention to me. That flavor profile, I can't, it's the only thing, even I love something I love salsa, I love pizza, of course, you get in, but the buffalo sauce is the only thing that I can taste in my sleep. That's it'll be a Tuesday and I'm I am jonesing. I got to get buffalo sauce in my body one way or the other the next 48 hours. Right. And it's It's so important to me. And it's not like, I got wings. It's like, I get it. I eat chicken constantly, but it's really 98% about the sauce to me. I love it so much. I just love it so much.
I also favor the traditional buffalo. The only other time, like I'll try others, but like my two staples are the traditional buffalo. But I also like Cajun dry rub. I think is quite good.
Okay.
Too. Yeah.
Okay.
But those are that's like when I like growing up, you could just like call a bar and like they'll bring wings to your house. That's what we would always get, buffalo and Cajun every time.
Okay.
Yeah.
What an existence you lived. It was great. You call a bar and they bring wings to your house? Where?
Yeah. The guy who made the wings,
Philly style?
His name was Pudgy, and it was funny because he was skinny.
You should have it.
Makes a great wing. Yeah.
How are you not a character on Abbott Elementary? What is going on? I want Philly Billy.
I worked at the school district of Philadelphia. I could be a character.
Yeah. All right. What are you thinking about?
I'm thinking about hockey, and I just want to put it on people's radars if they're looking for anything to watch this weekend, sporting events wise, because it's like football season's over. Mm-hmm. I think people typically wait for like the playoffs for the NBA and the NHL, and like baseball spring training is even still a few weeks away. The NHL, in lieu of the All-Star game, is doing a thing called the Four Nations Face-Off, where it's like NHL players are representing their countries, but it's USA, Canada, Finland, and Sweden. And it's the first like good on good international hockey that we've had since the 2016 World Cup. So it's been a long time since we've had this. So like I'm pretty excited for it. I think international hockey is probably second to international soccer in terms of just like competitive sporting events that like people like really put like their heart and soul into. So I'm excited to watch it. But the game that I'm most excited for is Saturday night. The US is playing Canada in Montreal. So if you're looking for a thing to watch this weekend, put that on your radar. I think it'll be quite enjoyable.
Is America supposed to be good, or are we going to get our butts whooped?
America. So America is. I was actually listening to a hockey podcast about this the other day. There's a thought that America might be positioning itself to surpass Canada as like the dominant hockey power. The major part of this is like Russia's very good, and Russia's not a part of it, I think, for obvious reasons. But no, USA is pretty good. USA has like a lot of good young forwards, and I think the US has also won the last 2 junior world championships. So it's like it's coming, but this could be like maybe Canada's last stand too, which is kind of exciting.
Wow. Yeah. Take that, Canada. Plus it's going to be weird when Canada's the state, and then we just have to jam everybody onto one.
That's right.
The one team.
Yeah.
But Finland and Sweden are good enough to have their own thing. Like, what about the guys from Slovakia and stuff like that? Like, what about them?
It's weird. I think the top 5 or 6 in the world rankings are these 4 teams, and then it's like Russia and Germany, but Germany doesn't have enough NHL players. It's an NHL sponsored event, so Germany doesn't have enough NHL players to put a roster together. And then I think Czechoslovakia is next, but then it's like you would have been 5 teams because they're not going to put Russia in, so they just kept it at 4.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a sports thing, but it's a point I wanted to make when we were discussing the Super Bowl that does relate to college football, but I forgot, so I want to bring it up now. I saw there was a decent amount of like, hey, everybody wanted Nick Sirianni and Ryan Day fired, and now look at this. They won the championship, right? Didn't you see a bunch of that?
As someone who once wanted Nick Sirianni fired, yes, I did see some of that.
Because there's nothing that some people like to do better than run to the defense of a coach. It just is like it's. And here's my point about that. I think the Eagles and Ohio State are both similar in this, that their fans all along the way rightly thought we have the most talent. And we hope that our coaches don't get in the way of that. And if it feels like our coaches are getting in the way of these incredibly talented rosters, because before the Super Bowl, everybody agreed that the Eagles were more talented than the Chiefs. Right. And everybody knew coming into this season that Ohio State was the most talented team. And if it feels like a team is not playing up to its talent capabilities, then you say, I don't know, is this the best coach for the job? And so in the end, if your point is like, let's all run to the defense of a coach, because of course, how dare we not defend a coach at every spot? The $12 million isn't enough that everybody has to apologize to them. I actually think the fans were right, because their point was, we're good enough to win it all. Are we sure the coaches aren't getting in the way? And again, we have to shout out the Ohio State student newspaper, The Lantern. Noah Weiskopf is his name, right? Did the great story about the meeting that the Ohio State players had. That was very publicized, but like he really delved into it after the Michigan loss. And they were asking hard questions of Ryan Day, like, why did you call that game that way, right? Wasn't that part of it?
Yeah.
Like the offensive game plan. So it's like, hey, so when everybody is in a rush, the fans were right. Our players are good enough to win. We're questioning if the coaches are getting in the way. And then, to their credit, the coaches didn't get in the way. The coaches, by the end, were additive instead of subtractive, and their teams won the championships. But we don't have to go back and act like reasonable critiques in the midst of a season are wrong because coaches change and then succeed. Right. Why are we in such a hurry? Do we have to kiss people's butts 100% of the time? Is that what we have to do? Or can we have reasonable critiques and then be like, oh, congratulations for like maybe learning, not because you were criticized, but realizing it yourself. It just bothered me the way that came out. Like, all these dumb people who wanted coaches fired. It's like, or why didn't they look better the whole time? Because look at all the talent. Anyway, maybe I'm getting caught up in it, but it bugs me how quick. Oh, sorry if I didn't smooch your butt the whole time. Let me run back and smooch extra now. It's big boy school. I don't know what to tell you. Everyone's making a lot of money, and the stakes are very high. And to hold people to a high standard is fine. And to congratulate them when they meet it, but we don't have to retroactively kiss their butts when they weren't meeting that standard.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you did a good job there of mentioning the other thing I feel about it too. It's like, I don't think like the fans who were critical like deserve praise for like getting them to the point either. It's like that. I don't know that one necessarily has anything to do with the other. It is self-evaluation that gets you to that point. I don't think Ryan Day won a national championship because he was reading Twitter, but
right.
But I think it's okay to feel like a team is underachieving, but then, as you said, also be fair when they achieve the goal that they set out to achieve. And both those things said that,
yeah. Was Sirianni's coaching like on point every week the last 2 seasons for the Eagles?
No.
He was screwing it up for a while, wasn't he?
Yeah, he does some weird things.
Yeah.
But
then it's like if you keep screwing it up, maybe you shouldn't be the coach there anymore because the Eagles are supremely talented. It's like, okay, stop screwing it up. Congratulations. Anyway, that's it. I just get mad when people yell at fans, as always. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here live. Thanks for being here on the podcast. We'll see you back with 2 more shows next week, but they'll be on Tuesday and Thursday instead of Monday and Wednesday, right? We're telling the people that it's my fault. I'm going to be out of town on Monday, so we're going to drop a Tuesday and Thursday, and we still have some more stuff planned. So, off-season stuff moving around. That's the deal for next week.
Yeah, and I think Monday is a holiday for some people too, I believe, isn't it? President's Day.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it all works out for everybody. If you're a president or former president, but not James Morrison, go watch that show. But don't think about me while you're watching that. He's so handsome.
Okay.
It's hard to believe how old he is. My God, he looks like he's 33. That guy. Anyway, thanks to producer Mike, as always, for making us look good and sound good. Like, subscribe, tell a friend. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.